Hi, I'm Mike North. I'm a principal staff engineer and a product architect at Stripe, and I've been a front-end master's instructor for 10 years. I made this course because the TypeScript monorepo ecosystem has never been better at making big projects feel fast and light. In this course, we'll refactor a monolith into a monorepo using tools like Learna and Nx to speed up builds, linting, and tests. You'll learn to unify dependency versions across packages and use nip to spot dead code and unused exports. By the end of this course, you'll know how to make your biggest TypeScript projects feel faster and lighter than ever. What are the benefits of organizing your code this way? Like, why would you aim for a monorepo instead of kind of the polyrepo approach where you would treat every library you have as a separate Git repo? Well, first off, there's the issue of dependency management. If you've ever worked on something, say in the open source, JavaScript ecosystem, you'll make a change in a library, like you'll open up your PR and it'll get merged, and then you have a whole bunch of work where you have to go to other packages that depend on this and then run npm install or pnpm install or whatever it is, and float that lock file pinned version forward a little bit, and you kind of have to pull it through all of the things that depend on it. And this has to happen in multiple layers, right? You could be several layers deep in a dependency graph, and a small change could result in you having to do a lot of work beyond making the code change just to propagate through a polyrepo ecosystem. Well, the idea of monorepos is you're often locally referencing other parts of this software project, and you're kind of evolving all packages at once. You could open up a single pull request that touches 3 or 4 different packages within one Git repository, get that merged, and there's really no follow-on step that you have to take. So that's part of what makes it attractive. And especially for like a large company with a lot of different things going on, a lot of different packages that they have set up, it's kind of attractive to say, we don't have to deal with this problem of, somebody made an improvement, but it's a whole new set of work to sort of propagate that improved whatever it is, that chunk of value through our ecosystem. And you end up with people that are sort of like 2-3 years behind on some dependency just because they haven't gotten around to doing that work. A additional benefit of this, and it's possible to get this benefit in a polyrepo ecosystem, it's that in a monorepo, it's generally easier to be able to say, I've made a change in a library that's, say, 3 levels deep in a dependency graph, right? Like, say it's some UI that depends on some library, that depends on some other library, that depends on some other library, and you're right there at the bottom. Well, it's a lot easier when everything's in one Git repo to sort of run the entire test suite, not just for the library you changed, but everything that depends on it, and ensure that you're not just validating against some small set of unit tests, you're validating the whole project when, composed together. Did this actually work? Am I going to be able to roll this out? The next tool I'm going to show you is called SyncPack, and what this helps you do is detect variance in the versions of packages, the variance in the versions of external dependencies that your packages depend on. So this is the tool that will help you identify how many versions of React are in your micro front ends. And potentially it will help you consolidate down so that your like checkout times, or so your like npm install or pnpm install times are faster, and you're starting to benefit from the idea of a monorepo, which means there's a greater sense of sort of the whole repo advancing together. So now I've got like some 5.7x version in my UI package, some 5.6x version in my server package, and in models, I'm going to float as far as I can in the 5.8 release stream. We should get a lint hit here, and we do. So we can see that it's telling us we've got 3 copies of TypeScript, and these are the things that it has identified. Now, personally, I like the check like the lint command here, it also has a sync pack fix, which what that will do is go and forcibly bump these up. And if you're, I guess if you're super confident that that's going to work out okay, maybe that's what you want to do. But in a project of any significant complexity, like I would be doing these one at a time. And I might have a check like this be part of a nightly build or a weekly build where I could sort of periodically get a report and, you know, kind of keep tabs on like how much floating is actually going on, how much variance on certain packages is actually going on within my monorepo. So still a good tool. And like imagine the case where you have 200 packages in your monorepo. Like this really will help you detect, you know, where things are getting a little weird. Next, we're going to apply a TypeScript compiler feature called TypeScript project references, which is related to composite projects. And this will improve the performance of our TypeScript builds. Now, in this workshop project, the builds are fast. There's just not much code here. But this will make a huge difference in a monorepo of significant size. And it's really easy to set up. So the first thing we need to do is think about we need to think a little bit about a dependency graph, and we need to understand like what's depending on what. So we will need to, in the models folder, in the tsconfig.build.json, because this is really a build feature, we're going to have to go into the compiler options and say composite true. What we're doing here is we're enabling this project to be compiled in a way where you can have a piece of build information for this package, or really for like TypeScript would regard this as a project, like a tsconfig refers to some collection of source code. And anyway, this project is going to have a build file that can be stitched together with other pieces of build information to allow rebuilds to happen more incrementally. And just remember what our baseline is. Yes, we are sharing some code, right? Like, or we're benefiting from some consolidated compile stuff. Like there is one dist folder for the models package, and anyone using the models package points to that dist folder. But the downside here is anytime we touch anything in a package, that whole package is being rebuilt. And so this composite project and project references and these TS build info files, they allow even more incremental compiling at the module level rather than at the package level. And that, again, like your project gets big enough, you will notice a big difference here. In fact, this is, if you're not using this and you have a sizable monorepo, this is absolutely the first thing you should invest in. So composite true. In fact, we're going to add this to all the package JSONs of everything in our monorepo. Sorry, the tsconfig build JSONs, not the package JSONs. So there's the server, and we'll add it to the UI. And just because of how Vite works, this tsconfig is what's used for build. And so we're going to, we'll add it here. Great. Now we need to establish references. And so these have to do with like edges on your dependency graph. And I want you to think about them as going hand in hand with something like this. If you have a workspace dependency, you should also be establishing a project reference to go along with that. Now, your build won't fail if you're missing this project reference, but this is what you need in order to get that kind of speed up factor. Here's what it looks like. You're going to have it as a top level property of the tsconfigs you're using to build. And again, we're in the UI one, so there's no build here, but that's what it's for. And we're going to create a references array with one item in it, and it's the path to build.json. This file doesn't exist yet, but it will in a moment. So this is going to be sort of our builds, our incremental build artifact, if you will. I'm going to copy this because I'll need something very similar in the server package JSON or tsconfig build JSON. And it's a top-level property. Too many commas. And turns out, same relative path. Models tsconfig build.json. And now I just ran pnpm builds, and it built everything. Here's our models, our server, and our UI. And we get these files now. And you can see just there's a lot of information here about which declaration files are used and what your dependencies are and what version of everything is being used. This effectively is what it means to have these project references. Now, unless we're working with something of substantial size, we're not going to see a speed up factor here. But trust me, it's there. And you will know it's working for you when you apply this to a large project. And you can see, especially that incremental rebuild time is faster. And the incremental build time, the way incremental compilation affects the performance of your language server, that's also going to be important, right? That's affected by this.